Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, we're going to go back to the Open Media Vault and figure out what went wrong and make a determination right after this. Whenever I'm looking at a problem like this, you don't know whether you're fighting one problem or two problems. You don't know, is it hardware, software, configuration, user error, just moved in the wrong phase. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that we need to cover here. So the first thing we'll need to do is to figure out, was this a user problem? And you probably remember that in the previous video, I discovered that the Open Media Vault, when I configured the share, it didn't store it. So let's start with that. And I'm going to go to full screen here, and we'll figure that out. So I'll bring up my browser here, and we'll go to the website for the Open Media Vault admin. We'll log in as admin. Hopefully. Oops. I've been getting that a lot on the Raspberry Pi, and then the second time I do it, it seems to work just fine. So maybe something new to look at too. So this is where I left off last time, and I had set up the share, and I had set up my NAS2 share folder, and then it stuck those default options in. But what happened was I clicked this on, but I didn't hit save. And this thing, I'm so used to things being non-modal. This is modal. Modal means that I have to take some action other than clicking this in order for the settings to actually set in. So let me clear that for a minute. Let me clear this for a minute. And I'll go over to the exports directory. And as we can see that now, I have a /export/NAS2. Now, that is not the name I want to mount because this is just strange to me, but it is the way they have it configured. They create a subdirectory under export for the share, and then they have a mount for export on top of it. I suppose this is how they manage in their software, how they manage their exports, and that's fine as long as there's some entry in here. The other thing we need to look at is do I have NFS running? And indeed I do. Indeed I do. So that's good. So I should be able. I'm going to leave those up because I'm going to need those later. But let's just go over and see if I can mount it. Let me unmount the device first. I'm going to mount this. It's a NFS type. That defaults to NFS 4 or 3. I don't know if 2 works with just doing that by itself. You can also put in that or that if you want, but this will do a search on it. So OMB NAS2, that should be the name of the share that I created, and I wanted to mount that on directory OMB. Okay, looks like all good. We're mounted, and I put some files out here, and yep, they're there. So let's just do a little test here. I'm going to run, let me show you what they are first. This is the read version of the OMV, and it's going to perform this test using file. And I like file because it gives me a little bit more information about what's going on. Oh, IO zone is good too, but I think file for this test will be a little bit better to use. So anyway, it's just preference, that's all. And let's just see what we get performance-wise. And whether or not we're seeing any network errors. Even more important. All right, so okay, so here I have the job started. It is doing, this is the percentage of the time remaining, or has been completed, I should say. This is the read rate, and this is the IOPS, or 6. This is pretty disappointing. 12 megabytes per second on an SSD over the network. Now, typically, when we're talking gigabyte networks, we should expect in the neighborhood of 90 to 112, 120 even megabytes per second. So this is well below that performance, almost an order of magnitude below. It certainly is about a tenth of where I would expect it to be. But it is consistent. I did not vary very much during this run. So, okay, so before we make any rash conclusions, so what I'm looking for here is typically hardware devices that do storage have differences in their read and write performance. It's very rare that you would see something that would be symmetrical, unless it's maybe an NVMe. But in an SSD attached device, I'm done with this, so yeah, that's fine. You can log out. You can do whatever you want. So, so typically, we shouldn't see this being the same. So if I do a write test, I should not expect this to be the same. The only difference between these two commands is the operation, which is write instead of read. So let's go ahead and fire that up. Oops. Let's actually execute it instead of list it. Okay, now that's interesting. I would not expect that at all. But let's let it run, see what we actually come up with. This is what's called test bias. My bias is telling me that this is wrong, but I'm going to let it run and just make sure. This is not likely believable, is what I'm telling you. All right, we got some errors. You saw that one did not complete, and so it passed it on to the next I/O. So we're getting some errors. This is pretty bad. Okay, so yeah, 11.2 to 11.2 megabytes per second again. That's very consistent with the read. So, okay, why? Why would that be? Well, that's something that we need to go figure out, don't we? So I'm going to go back to my home directory, and then I'm going to go over here to master. And the reason why I use some tools over here, so master is always my performance machine. So it is always the service master on when I'm trying to fine-tune performance. And you might want to set up a machine to do this too. Master is a Raspberry Pi 4, as you can see. And so it also has the ports open in order to do this. So I'm going to apt install a couple of tools. I need iPerf 3 iPerf3 allows me to do coarse grain performance analysis on the network. I would not recommend you use this tool to measure latency. It's not very good for that, but it is good if you're just trying to make a determination on if you've got some kind of weird performance problem with the network. And ETH tool helps you identify what kind of a performance problem that is. So I'm going to get both of those, and I've already installed them. So iPerf is a client server app. So I need to have a server set up. And I've already opened that firewall port over here so that it will work. And then I'll use a fully qualified name just so I know what's going on. And wow, isn't that interesting? My transfer rate is 11.5 megabits per second, or 96.4 megabits per second on my bit rate. That's a lot slower than what I would expect it to be. And why do I say that? Well, if I've got node 1 over here, and this is a straight install of Raspbian Buster 10. So no, I haven't done anything with this at all. And it is also the same. If I bring this up, put these two together so that you can make sure, and you can see there's definitely something going on here. Raspberry Pi 3 Model 2 1.2 is the rev. Don't know. This could be a different rev. On this one, it might be a little older, which is fine. It just makes this even more interesting. So I'll do an iPerf 3. Let's just make sure I have it. Yep. And I'll connect to master just like I did before. These are on the same segment of the network, so yeah. So what did I get over here? 96.4, 295 meg. Yeah, so almost 3 times slower than what this would be. What the heck is going on here? All right, so we're going to narrow this down. So the first thing I need to do is to figure out what is the device name for my network port that I am using, and it's ETH0. And this tool, if you put in ETH tool and then the name of the device, it just gives you the settings for that device. The first place I would look is right here. Actually, right here. It's saying the speed is 100 megabits a second. All right. Let's compare it. Oh, yeah? Oh, let's spell it right. Maybe that'll work better. Okay, so we got a discrepancy. My speed over here is 1,000 megabits per second and only 100 over here. And the advertised link and the supported link modes and the advertised link modes are missing the 1000 base T full. Well, that's certainly going to make a difference. So, so I went back over to the, now we got to figure out what caused this change. And I went back over here to the install script, and I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to clone it. And I would do a get clone and then put in what I just copied. Of course, this is going to fail because it's already there. Okay. There's the install script. Let's look for network. Okay. So what did they, oh. So they are purging DHCP CD5 and the network manager and setting up systemd resolved and systemd network D. Oh. Could that be the problem? So this support ticket probably needs to go to both the Raspberry Pi folks and to the OMV folks. I suspect that they are using, now I don't think this is a bug in the script, but it is certainly that these two machines, these two different ways of configuring the network have different outcomes. And that would be unexpected. So one thing I've noticed here is that it's missing the HAP. This leads me to believe that this is a Raspberry Pi Foundation configured entry, because normally you would have half and full, and they're only configuring the full. So yeah, I'm just curious. On the Raspberry Pi 4, yeah, it does both. So this bit of trickery that the Raspberry Pi 3 does in order to get to 200 megabits on the Ethernet channel is obviously not being configured when they take away the network manager and the DHCP CD5, and they do the configuration under SysD network. So so already we've identified something that both vendors need to be aware of, and then figure out what do we do about that, or if anything, maybe we don't do anything at all about it, and I just say, oh, well, you don't really want to use a Raspberry Pi 3 on this because you're only going to get a third of the performance. But I want to go check one other thing, because I know that before I declare that, hey, we've got a machine that's underpowered here for this application, before I say that, let's confirm it, because right now the only thing I really know is that the network is slow. And if I fix the network, is my performance going to come up? So we needed to figure that out. I mean, is that the fix? Is the fix just to put this 1,000 base T advertised and supported link nodes back in, and let this run at full speed? Well, that fixed my problem. So let's do a df minus kh. So we're not quite done, are we? We're not quite done. Okay, and there's my NAS2 mount. Ta-da! There's my directory. So this is obviously mounted to SDA1. This is looking at, and that is definitely the SSD. So let's see. Let's run our little benchmark again. I'll probably have to run this as sudo this time, just because I bet I don't own it. Can't? Oh, of course you can't. You don't have a dot in front of it. All right, so it's running. So this is the raw performance of the drive itself. And it is taking some errors. So this shares the bandwidth. As I said, the USB ports share the bandwidth with the Ethernet controller. This is not exactly what I would call amazing performance. It's about half of a USB 2 performance, about half. Well, actually, it's even lower than that. Yeah, it's about half. It's about half. So yeah, about 30 to 30, and that's, so if I fix the network problem, I probably could get pretty close to what the machine would allow for the transfer rate, but still that would not be something I would be happy with. If the maximum speed I could support on this, and I knew that going in, that the excuse me, that the USB 2 ports would be the factor. So I'm going to say we have a hardware limitation here, and the Raspberry Pi 3 is just not optimal for this task. And I would be looking at the Raspberry Pi 4, and perhaps maybe now I've done the test on this on OMV on x86, as I said before, and it runs fine. So yeah, I can't recommend using a Raspberry Pi 3 either. It's just not. That's not something I would be happy with a NAS, and I'm sure you would. You really wouldn't be either. So I think with that, I've kind of covered the steps that I wanted to cover today on some of the things that that I use in order to track down the tool. So what did we conclude from this? First, there was a user error. I had a problem that I did not finish the save and create the NFS export table or start the services for NFS. The second problem is that the Raspberry Pi 3 is a bit weird in the way it does its networking. It actually has a gigabit Ethernet connector, but because that control software goes through the USB hub, they cannot push that Ethernet connector at full speed, and so instead they cut it. They only guarantee 200 megabits per second in performance. Third, we have the compounding problem that the installation script takes away the Raspberry Pi Foundation's extensions in order to enable that higher speed mode, and reverts the card back to the same mode that the Pi 2 runs under, which is 100 megabits per second. And the third problem, or actually the last problem here, is really because it's a USB 2 hub that's inside the Raspberry Pi 3, we can't get as much performance as we would like for a NAS to have. So, I mean, that's really where things are with this. I hope you enjoyed this today. If there's some troubleshooting tips that you use, please let me know in the comments below. Always willing to learn something from you as well. But this is kind of my order of things. User error first. Try to eliminate that. Configuration, eliminate that. Eliminate hardware before software because software is more complicated and will take longer. So if you find your problem in the first three, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to track down in the software what the problem is. But in this case, it was pretty easy because the install script pretty much clearly showed what it was doing. It was replacing the network manager and the DHCP CD5. Anyway, hope to see you again real soon, and bye for now.